Oh, that'll do nicely. Hey, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. So I guess I'll start off with reminding folks that while I will try and keep up with the chat, I make no guarantees at catching comments or questions if they are not accompanied by a super chat. I will still try. I just can't promise, and that will also get you a little hurt from me. So keep that in mind. We'll be breaking at 7:30 for me to take a look at questions from the Discord. And yeah, I'm back. I was gone for a while. My flight went out on Thursday. And got back Sunday, but I left and overnighted with somebody on Wednesday night so I could get up for my incredibly early flight Thursday morning, and then got in very late on Saturday. So yeah, no, not Saturday, Sunday. Got in very late on Sunday just because that's how time works. Hui. So yeah, so I didn't stream on Twitch the last few days because I was away. It was great meeting you in person at Gallifrey One. I hope you had a good time and hope you can come back next year. Oh, thank you, Harriet. I hope so too. I don't make any promises this far in advance. It's going to depend on what my finances look like. I really would like to get there annually. I just don't know if I'll always be able to do that. So the Hidden Brain podcast has Summerton to you? No. That's a slight exaggeration, Gozer. Okay, so let me back up. For anyone who doesn't follow me on Twitter, it was brought to my attention by somebody on Discord that the latest episode of the Hidden Brain podcast, which is a pretty sizable educational podcast, actually used a clip of me. The context for that, it was actually a conversation that they were having about sort of political division, and a certain aspect of it was likened to like how people approach fandom, and Doctor Who was cited in specific. And as a result, they played a couple of clips actually from not my most recent, but one of my older videos ranking all the Doctors. I think it's one from 6 years ago in specific. So they played that. Now, they didn't say where they pulled the clip from. That in and of itself, in the podcast, I don't think that's an issue. It was very clear that it was a clip that was pulled. It was my voice. It was a voice distinct from any of the others. There, they kind of set it up, and then they come out of the clip. But they don't say where it was from, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem. It's very clear that it came from somewhere, and they had pulled all kinds of clips from news broadcasts and all these other things up to that, and they didn't stop every time to say where the clip was from. So I think within the confines of the podcast, that's fine. What was a little frustrating though, I'm not going to say that I was Summerton, Gozer, because they weren't trying to pass my words off as their own. So no, improperly cited material, I guess would be closer to what Illuminati was doing. Or at least some of what she was doing. But in any case, I don't think it's a problem that they didn't say where the clip came from. That having been said, I was a little bit frustrated to realize that I couldn't find anywhere where they cited where any of the clips used came from. So this isn't even just about me. I went to their website, I looked at the show notes, I pulled up the transcript, which is where I thought it would be. I thought that for the clips, in the transcript, it would say voice of blah from blah. But no, it just says speaker 19. They just numbered. So it gave me a number and designated me as separate from the other speakers that have been heard, but none of the clips were credited. And I actually do think that's a problem for a podcast like that in particular, which is an educational podcast. If you're going to tout yourself as an educational podcast, you should probably somewhere uphold the standard of citing where you pulled stuff from. So like, it's not a problem of like, oh, they pass it off as their own work. No, but they didn't put anywhere where this came from. Yeah, that was a little weird. Anyways, that turned into a much longer story than I intended it to. Saw the teaser for the upcoming Wicked movie too. I did too. I don't care. If other people are excited for it, wonderful. I'm happy for you. I didn't care before I saw it. I saw it. I still don't care. 26 months of pure distilled queer joy. Thank you, Dharma, for continuing to support as a member on the channel. I appreciate that greatly. Holds up sign, citation needed. Yeah, pretty much. Although, like, not in the spirit that I would normally be like, citation needed in terms of, like, where the hell did you even get that claim from? But, you know, in terms of, like, it'd be nice if people had the ability to verify you didn't pull quotes out of context. And like, again, to be clear, I don't think I was quoted out of context. I don't think anything was done to make me look bad or anything like that, but like, just best practice. And like, part of me is like, okay, to be fair, I only started getting better about that myself within the last few months as a result of the Somerton thing. But then on the other hand, this is again, a educational podcast, an intellectual podcast with a full staff. I'm one person. So, I don't know. It was still kind of like flattering that clearly somebody on the editing side of that either already knew who I was, or I pulled high enough in a search results for clips that they could find that they found my stuff. Either way, like, it's kind of flattering. Just, you know, say where you got stuff from. And again, I'm trying not to be too harsh on that because I'm only just starting to get better about it. But I think I'm going to hold a podcast that used to be on NPR to a higher standard than a one-person show. You know what I mean? Like the Missy cosplay. Thank you. That was the first time I'd ever worn that full thing together. So I was glad it worked. Got any food or drink guilty pleasures? I don't think there's any reason to feel guilty about food or drink. Well, actually, that's not true. I suppose if it's a particularly unethical food, and that is a thing that exists, maybe then feel a little bit guilty. But no, not really. Have I seen the X-Men '97 trailer? I did. I have no thoughts on it. Like, it is very much evoking the original. I don't think the original holds up. I think it barely held up at the time. I think a lot of people are seriously nostalgic for it because I think for a lot of folks in my generation, it's what got them into X-Men, and I appreciate that. But it wasn't that good a show. Like, it was good insofar as it pretty faithfully adapted a number of storylines and did them decently, but like visually, it wasn't great. The voice acting was kind of all over the shop in terms of quality. And while the opening, you know, the credits and the opening theme and everything is memorable as hell, I find very little about the rest of the show to be memorable at all. Is that the picture I sent you on the table behind? I'm trying to remember sources for who sent me what. Maybe? I can't. My memory is shit, and I don't think to write down where stuff comes from. That's why there's whole swaths of stuff that's over on the shelves that, like, I could tell you it's a gift, like from a subscriber. I couldn't tell you who. Did they have a good cider selection at Gallifrey One? No, they did not have cider at all. I was drinking wine. Would you be opposed to the idea of the Dream Lord returning and being revealed to be a regeneration of the Valyard? Yeah, kinda. Because, like, first of all, I'd be all in favor of the Dream Lord returning in theory, except that if you're going to tailor him properly, he should probably be pretty different, given that that one was very specifically tailored to be a dark iteration of Matt Smith. And if you're going to do it properly, it should be a dark iteration of whatever Doctor there is at the time. I would still say get Toby Jones regardless, but it should be actually fairly different. And connecting that to the Valeyard, I don't think that helps. Like, the way in which they're inherently connected is they both sort of speak to the inner and or potential darkness of the Doctor, but I think literally connecting them together kind of devalues them both. I think it says more about the Doctor's capacity for darkness that that more than one entity exists as basically a dark reflection of him than to have them all be the same thing, if that makes sense. The people who made Celeste made a mini follow-up for the 60th anniversary called Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain. It's really good for a short game. I'm glad to hear that, Jamie. I enjoyed Celeste. I did not fall in love with it to the degree that a lot of people fell in love with it. So I'm not sure that that's something I'm going to check out. But I'm really glad that the game did well for them, and it obviously means a lot to a lot of people. I did play it. I did finish it. I did enjoy it. Just, it didn't all quite hit me in the way that did a lot of other people. I was into X-Men before it was cool. Hipster brag. So happy you got to see Katie again. Oh, Katie's a joy. So for folks who don't follow me on TikTok, there were actually two different Whovians of TikTok meetup where like a bunch of people, pretty much all cosplayers, we all got together near the pool at the hotel where the convention was, and we just all like started shooting TikToks, and like some of them involved like just a couple of people, some of them like they would wrangle as many people as they could for some of the ideas. And Katie, who is kind of the premier 13th Doctor cosplayer on TikTok, not just because she looks great in the outfit, but she's also mastered the voice. Like, she's gotten so good at the accent. I've seen clips of her fooling actual people from the UK that was her real voice, and it's not. She's American. But she's so sweet, and I've met her before. I met her when I was at Gallifrey One a couple years ago. But yeah, she's a lot of fun. I clipped the entire movie of Nimona off YouTube. Okay, yeah. So for folks who don't know, Netflix has put out the entire Nimona movie, the whole thing, start to finish, on the official Netflix YouTube channel. I really would like them to announce a physical copy because I want to buy it. But that said, it's now accessible to a bunch of people who didn't see it before. And like you, Gozer, I clipped the entire thing. Now, unfortunately, it does have a Netflix watermark up in the right-hand corner, which I don't love. But it does mean that in theory, so long as, even if Netflix drops it off their streaming service, I'll still have it. So I'll take what I can get. Dharma coming in with a super chat. Thank you very much. Speaking of Marvel, thoughts on the Fantastic Four news? I have almost none. So for folks who don't know, casting was announced for the main four. Pedro Pascal is Mr. Fantastic. That's about the only one I have any thoughts on, because the only other actor I know, they got the guy who played Eddie in season 4 of Stranger Things to be Johnny Storm, which could work. I could see that, but like I don't know the actors that they got for Ben or for Sue. But for Reed, it's Pedro Pascal, who was kind of everybody's second choice after John Krasinski. And like, I guess my main thought on that is, are they going to try and make him likable? Because if you don't read the comics, Reed Richards is kind of an asshat. Like, he's he can be done well. Like, there are good stories that involve him, but like, just as a person, he is not the likable member of that team. And Pedro Pascal is well known for his innate likability. Now, sometimes not every character he plays leans into that, but I feel like that's present for most of his characters. So I'm going to be curious to see what they do with that. But like, it's just casting. Like, when they announce casting for a villain, which will likely also mean they're announcing who the villain is, I might have more thoughts. But just on that initial casting news, I'm like, okay, yeah, so they cast it. Cool. I was into X-Men before Hank turned blue. That's a brag. That's legit right there. Me and my dad almost flooded our bathroom this week. Oh, geez. He just finished doing some maintenance on it. I started running a bath. He said, check if the side panel is sticking out, blocking the door when we close it. Should have done the experiment with one of us in the bathroom. Whoops! Yeah, flooding bathrooms is no joke. A Batman villain Toby Jones would nail would be Professor Pig. Michael Sheen should also play a Silver-sized Bronze Age style Joker. Honestly, I kind of don't want the Joker at all. I really want to take a break from the Joker. I just really, give him a rest. Just for a bit, please. With respect, disagree on the OG X-Men cartoon. It was closer to the comics than any other property at the time. I'm not disagreeing with that, Dharma, but the thing is, I'm also the kind of person who says if basically everything that's good about you comes from the fact that you faithfully adapted another thing that was good, then you are not bringing anything to the table. Like, the only thing that I can therefore say about it is, cool, it might have gotten a bunch of people into the comics because it was adapting them faithfully. But, like, speaking as someone who generally feels if you're going to switch it to another medium, do something with it. Don't just, bleh, here's the same thing again. That's really all that cartoon did. Now, for some people, that is a mark of quality. For me, that is a mark of boredom and lack of originality. But that's me. FYI, Celeste64 confirms that Madeline is dating Theo's sister. The dialogue is really cute as always. Aw, that's sweet. Did you run into Jason Gallery at Gallifrey One again? I did. We talked a little bit. Not a ton. Like, I was busy, he was busy. We didn't set time aside to meet up and chat. But yeah, I did see him, and we did chat a little bit. I know he's been busy wrangling Eric Roberts for more audios. Who I also saw there. I saw him in the autograph section. Autograph alley. There we go. Was Reed Richards done well in Doctor Strange 2? I mean, I can't really answer that one way or the other because he was just kind of I can't really answer whether any of the cameo characters in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness were well done. Because they were on screen so briefly, really the only thing there was for them to do was to visually represent what it was they were. And they all successfully did that. There just was not enough time to really get a strong sense of character from them, given what their role in the thing was. I really don't have. I have an increasingly low opinion of that movie. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, ugh. So I remember the Plastic Man cartoon. I remember that it existed. I never watched it. Mr. Fantastic is certainly the leader trope. Well, he's not just the leader. He is Father Knows Best. I mean, almost literally. That was kind of the thing he was fulfilling in the 60s. And he's never really gotten updated because he kind of can't. The only way you can update that is to deconstruct it and acknowledge how, boy, that doesn't work that well, or why that doesn't fit into the world, which some stories successfully did. I think the most recent, and it's not even that recent, it's 20 years old at this point, but the most recent stuff that I saw done with Mr. Fantastic that worked, made him work as a character, was done by Mark Waid in the early 2000s. His run was... Mark Waid is so good. I've never heard... I have not read everything the man's ever written in comics, but I have not heard of anything that he wrote where people were like, oh, that wasn't very good. The man doesn't seem to know how to write a bad comic. Pedro can make Joel in The Last of Us likable. He can make Reed Richards likable. Well, I don't doubt that he could make him likable, Gozer. My point was a bit more should they be trying to make him likable? Or should they be accepting the fact that the guy's a jackass? Should they just lean into that? Well, I'm not sure they can now with that casting. Am I a hipster? Not last I checked. Jammed the pocket knife through and pushed the panel back in. Well, quick thinking on that part. I saw you met Billie Piper. What was she like? It's hard to say because it's difficult to say that you meet someone when you get your picture taken with them, because that thing is such a rapid fire machine. Like the line, like there are multiple coordinators, like keep moving, keep moving. You step up, you step up there, and like the most you're gonna get to say is hi. They go, hi, how are you? Are you having a good time? And you're like, yeah, hope you are too. And they're like, thanks. Picture gone. To say that you met them, I can't. I can't really say that I've met Billy. I would say that you feel much more like you meet them if you get the chance to get your autograph signed by them, because there you will have at least a slight conversation, because at the very least they need to ask you for your name and what you want on when they sign stuff. And most of them will also like talk to you for 30 seconds, a minute, which isn't that much time, but like you actually feel like there's something, you actually feel like you get a sense of them there. So I couldn't really tell you what Billie Piper was like. She photographed well. That's kind of all I can say. One of my favorite mental hobbies is imagining if my favorite stories were older and were made into movies in other eras. Those include a silent film era version of Nimona. Huh. It's an interesting thought experiment. Way to pass the time. So I heard Kevin McNally got arrested before he could attend Gallifrey One. Yeah, I found that out this morning, Rowan. I actually somehow missed that he wasn't there. I think because I was too busy running around that I opted to do other stuff than like go to his panels. And I didn't bring anything for him to sign. So I didn't even clock that he wasn't there. But yeah, I found that out this morning. For folks who don't know, Kevin McNally was, he was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the first 3, I think. Mr. Gibbs, who was kind of the right hand to Jack, and in Doctor Who Flux, he was Professor Jericho, who was, I thought, the single best thing about Flux. He was the one thing that I could say, I really like this, with no asterisks, caveats, or qualifications. I really liked him in that. And he right before he was scheduled to leave for Gallifrey One, he got arrested for domestic abuse of someone who's not his wife. So yeah, I don't even really know what's going on there. But yeah, that was a weird thing to learn. And also, coincidentally, in looking into those stories, I found out, oh, he's been in Doctor Who before. He was in the Twin Dilemma. So I found out that bit of trivia at the same time I found out, oh, he's under arrest. Great. Am I gonna see Madam Web? Not in theaters. When it's free on streaming, maybe. Maybe I'll drink and watch it. Something that bugs me about for Morph in X-Men 97 is they didn't cast a non-binary actor for the role. I haven't looked into how many of the roles they actually recast for X-Men 97, because I know they made a deal of bringing back at least some of the original voice cast. And I don't know whether or not that's the case for Morph. That would have been nice. I'm not sure that's necessarily something that I'd hold against a project like X-Men 97, given that it is very specifically intended to be a continuation of a nostalgic property. I would call it a missed opportunity, but it's something I'm less inclined to like call out in the abstract of you did a bad thing, if that makes sense. When I was in the hospital, I felt trapped. Saw a pigeon on a side roof outside the window. I wish I could fly away. That thought felt poetic until I realized I was actually looking at some roof material that was sticking up in the shape that kind of looked like a bird from the angle of my window. All right, 255. I actually find that more poetic in a way. 60s cartoon series of Fantastic Four was great until the Human Torch was replaced by Herbie the Robot. Was that because they like put the Human Torch in the Spider-Man and Friends show? Marvel was weird in the 60s when it came to cartoon adaptations. How was Gallifrey One? It was good. It's weird. It felt both oddly low-key, yet at the same time, I felt like I was running around nonstop. Like, I don't know if it just felt slightly less momentous because I'd been twice before, And like the first time was obviously the first time, and the second time it was the first major thing I'd gone to post pandemic. Plus, a bunch of people who I knew but hadn't met before, like a bunch of people who I know through podcast connections and whatnot. I met for the first time. Whereas this time it was much more meeting people again who I've met before, and a lot more sort of reconnections. I don't know. It felt slightly less momentous, not in a way that's like, boy, it's not worth going again. I really want to go again. But yet at the same time, I was running around and felt fairly exhausted by the time it was done, in a good way. Coyote Azul, thank you very much for the super chat. Any comic/comic characters from your youth you look back fondly of? I remember reading Richie Rich, Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck, and Power Pack when I was a pre-13-year-old. I didn't really read comics before I was like 10, 11. I would say the one that I tend to think of very much as something from my youth that I think the most fondly of is probably Spider-Man 2099. Because that started. I got into that right when it started. It was very much a product of its time, and it felt like more mine than something like just general Spider-Man, which I was also reading, but like had obviously been around for 30 years at this point, and now it's over 60. Oh boy. Have you seen Turning Red? I got to see it for the first time recently, theatrically re-released. Really enjoyed it. It was a good date movie, very sweet. I think I did a review on that one. I have seen it. I think I did a review on the in the break room, my secondary channel. It was fine. The thing that I think I acknowledged in the review, at least I hope I did, it was that the experiences it was speaking to, in terms of like the time period for that particular youth, being very specifically speaking to the experiences of young women and having those kinds of friendships, and having that those sort of connections to having a non-white experience, non-white family, like they all seemed like they were done really well, but they were also done in a way that didn't speak to me. Now, that's not a fault of the film. Stuff's not required to speak to me. But it did mean that I saw a lot of people really, really connect with it. And I'm like, it's good, but it's not connecting with me in the way it's connecting with you. Not to its detriment, not as a flaw in it, but just like, I was not the target audience. And in a way that I'm like, I'm totally okay with the fact that a movie about a coming of age experience of a young Canadian person of Asian descent on the cusp of puberty, very much dominated by ideas like having your first period, was going through. Wow, I wonder why I didn't connect quite so deeply to that. Like, it's fine. So, like, it's not one that I'm eager to rewatch in any way, but it's just because, like, I just didn't have the ways of connecting to it personally the way that, and, like, I also don't want to make it sound like just because something speaks to an experience other than mine, I can't connect with it. Like, I connected with Moana really well, but Moana kind of spoke to, a general sense of longing and wanting to break out, and, the balance of, if I chart my own path, well, what impact will this have on family, and the sort of the emotional core and the climax of that were all things that spoke to me a bit more than the interfamily dynamic that was very much different from any interfamily dynamic I ever experienced, to that Turning Red went for. Boy, I went off on that longer than I expected to. Favorite cozy game of mine is Graveyard Keeper. I have that one. I started playing it a little, but then I didn't get back to it. So if I start playing that one again, I need to start it over. Imagine Melendi Britt doing the iconic "I love you, I always have" monologue from the end of She Run the Princess of Power with the 1980s Catra and Adora voices. That would be amusing. I would get a real kick out of that. Are my nerves Gallifreyed? They're having Morph come out as non-binary in X-Men 97. They're already replaced their voice actor. Okay, if the character's gonna be explicitly non-binary, then yes, I would have liked them to have cast a non-binary actor. Do you have a favorite nursery rhyme? Not really. Evisceration. Thank you very much for the super chat. Love your Missy look at Gallifrey One. Thank you. To continue your April Fool's USA Doctor Who casting, who would you cast as J.K. Simmons' Missy? I previously said Meg Foster, but now I'm thinking Michelle Pfeiffer. Either one would work. The thing is, it'd be hard for me to come up with off the top of my head because one of the things that Joel and I did when we came up with that cast list was to figure out what year the actual canon Doctors, the actors, were born, and to try and find somebody born either that year or within 1 or 2 years of that year for the replacement, so that everybody was at least lining up as the same age. So what I would have to do is I'd have to look up Michelle. If I was to approach it the same way, I'd have to look up Michelle Gomez's age and then find actresses born in that year and then go off of that. Because that was kind of how we worked on narrowing down the list of potentials and working from there. Did I do anything for Valentine's Day? Yes, tried to go to bed early so that I could get up insanely early the next morning and get on a plane. Just finished Once a Future King Part 2 from Big Finish. Feels a bit like Doctor Who's take on the Avengers Endgame. Interesting. I haven't heard of that one. I'm trans and white, so I didn't really hate the experience. So I didn't really have the experiences that are depicted in the movie. Maybe I enjoyed it because it felt healing somehow. That makes total sense, Louise. Excuse me. What is Gallifrey One? It is a Doctor Who convention in Los Angeles. Excuse me. That happened this past weekend. All right. Which Doctor Who companion from the New Who era do you think I am most like? Jeez. Probably Bill. If we're being honest. Okay, I gotta pop over to the Discord real quick, see the questions there. Reminder, the Council of Geeks Discord is a Patreon exclusive perk. But I'm gonna hop over there real quick. Back as quick as I can. Oh, we got a few here. Here we go. Hope you had fun at the con. What color nail polish do you recommend when crushing capitalism? I'm thinking red and black. Well, if you want to go thematic, red and black would work because that's Antifa colors. But honestly, just whatever makes you feel powerful. Did you have a good time at Gallifrey One? I did. Are there any other cons you're considering going to, like Dragon Con or Windy City Comic Con? Dragon Con, I think, would be fun to try out. Windy City Comic Con, I don't know anything about. I would like to go to Chicago TARDIS at some point, just see what that's like. There aren't too many other I have no interest in going to San Diego Comic Con, and it's just too huge. It's too huge. The idea just, blah. No, I don't like it. Don't like it at all. And New York Comic Con, I wouldn't want to go to that for a similar reason. So I guess those are kind of the ones off the top of my head as far as geeky conventions go. With respect to the Moody Blues, why do we never get an answer when we're knocking at the door? Well, at first guess, probably because you were disobeying the cardinal rule. If the rooms are rockin', don't come a-knockin'. Regarding Babylon 5, for me, Londo and Jakar start as a comedic B antagonist and end up as two of the most well-played, complex, and dare I say Shakespearean characters of any show, not just science fiction. Can you think of any others that rival that trajectory? Perhaps Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad, Tyrion till he blew it. Honestly, I'd probably put Catra from She-Ra and the Princess of Power on a similar level, because she starts out as just the embittered, well, initially you're not sure, but the embittered ex. She just starts out it just seems to be only spite that is driving her, and you're like, boy, she's got some issues. And then the true depth of those issues and how much damage she is prepared to inflict just to hurt Adora becomes evident by the end of season 3. And they really push her and they show how miserable she is. Like season 4, she's winning and she's miserable. And then, against all odds, and I did not think they could pull it off, season 5, they actually manage a redemption arc for somebody that I did not think they would be able to meaningfully make that work. And they did. Like, Catra's arc, I'm in awe of that. Okay, so after Time Flight, yikes. Yeah, that was rough. And he plans to tackle Black Orchid, the only pure historical after Troughton. That one with a very mixed rating. See, here's the thing. Technically, I already did. There was a brief period. There was about half a year between when I finished. This was on the podcast feed. There was about a half a year between when I finished my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop and was doing the See You Space Cowboy podcast, and when I started What the Frell with Jesse. And in that half year, I was putting the classic Doctor Who reviews on the podcast feed. I think this was actually before the break room started, so I wasn't sure where else to put them, just because I knew that they weren't pulling great numbers, and I didn't want that to harm the channel analytically. But so there's like 6 stories that the reviews exist, but they're on the podcast feed, meaning no one has heard them, including Black Orchid. And I was actually talking with Carolyn about this earlier today. I might have to rewatch those and do video reviews. Like, the lazy part of me, the part that wants to conserve earlier work, was like, oh, just find an image to put up and put the audio up, in video form on the channel. They're gonna stick out like sore thumbs if I do that. But if I reshoot them properly in the format that pretty much everything else is in, it means I have to rewatch them because it's been too long. And I think there's a decent chance I'm gonna end up having to do that. So I thought it was very funny in ways it was not supposed to be. So that's my actual thoughts on Black Orchid in a nutshell. I don't think you did individual episode reviews of Strange New Worlds Season 1, which I know you liked, but any remembered thoughts on the Elysian Kingdom, aka the Enterprise crew go to the Ren Fair episode? I actually had to look up what that was, because I did glance at least some of the questions that were up earlier in the day. And I had to double check because I couldn't remember the title. And then I looked and I was like, oh, right, that one. I actually rather liked that one. I thought that one was sweet. It had a nice fairy tale feel to it. I thought that one was nice. What is your opinion on Daredevil Born Again being rewritten to be a more direct continuation of the Netflix show with Foggy, Karen Page, and Bullseye coming back? Honestly, I legitimately forgot that Bullseye was in the 3rd season. Like, very seriously, I completely forgot he was in it. He made very little impression on me, that version of Bullseye. Bringing back Foggy and Karen, that I'm glad to see. They were such an integral part of Matt's life that to have them not there really would make it very different feeling from the Netflix show. So I am glad to see them coming back. I'm not thrilled at the fact that they're bringing John Bernthal as the Punisher back, because I didn't really like that iteration of the Punisher. The Punisher Netflix show was the first Marvel thing I bailed on before finishing. I got about halfway through the first season and I realized I'm bored. And like, that's not to say that it was the worst thing Marvel had done up to that point, but I powered through 2 seasons of Iron Fist on rage. That thing was so bad it made me angry. I can't power through on boredom. I can power through on anger. So like, there like some images showed up of John Bernthal as the Punisher. It's like, remember, he's coming back in Daredevil. I'm like, oh, crap. Right. And I know I'm going to be really out of step with everybody on this, because everyone else seems to be really excited. Everyone else seemed to think he was really great in the part. I just don't. I don't think he was bad in the part. I don't think he was like a net negative, but I thought the Punisher story was not great. It was okay. The character worked best. Here's what I'll grant. The character worked best when he was actually in Daredevil in that first half of season 2. He was way less interesting on his own. But even then, I didn't love him. The Punisher is a really hard character to make work, both on the page and in adaptations. And the John Barenthal one really did very little for me. What line is worse? 13's "Now They'll See the Real You" or Donna's "Do You Come in a Range of Colors"? Ooh. Between the two of... So, all right. As lines divorced from who it was, who's like just as a line, removed from the specifics of who it was who said it, Donna's line is worse. But in full context, 13's line is worse because Donna's line, while not great, it is something I could believe she would say. Whereas 13's line feels wrong being said by the Doctor. And again, not necessarily wrong in a purposely messed up way, but in a the writer didn't think through the potential meaning of that, did he? Way. Happened a lot with Chibnall. Out of all the shows you've been commissioned to watch, which ones are you most eager to continue watching? I really want to get back to Doom Patrol. I watched the first season. I started the second, but then I got buried in just all kinds of other stuff. I really do want to get back to that one. I really did like that show. Do you think you should debate issues that you don't think are actually morally relevant to the topic, but the person you're talking to does? Whenever the issues of trans athletes come up, I'm always hesitant to debate the issue of if science does or doesn't show whether they're better than cis women, because ultimately I don't care. I think it's wrong to exclude them regardless. There's several popular moral debates where I have this issue, where I find people are arguing about stuff that I don't think is actually important to the conclusion. Like another one is, I don't think a fetus's cognitive ability should have any bearing on if it's okay to violate a person's bodily autonomy, but most people seem to think the whole abortion debate should hinge on that. So you've actually inadvertently stumbled upon one of the major fundamental issues with a lot of the hot button topics, which is the two sides are not actually arguing about the same thing. This is actually very common, and the abortion debate is the key one to cite for that, because you have one side saying this is murder because this is a life that you're ending. So their whole argument hinges on the value of the life of an unborn child, whereas the other side is all focused on the safety and rights and bodily autonomy of the mother, of the parent. And those are not actually the same debate. So what ends up happening is, in reality, one side has said, this matters more to us. The other side has said, this matters more to us. But then they try and debate each other, but because they're not actually arguing about the same thing, they're not people who are in favor of abortion rights are not disagreeing that there is some kind of value to the life of a fetus. They have simply made the determination that the concerns of the adult parent override that. Just like it is not, strictly speaking, accurate to say that people who are against abortion and access to it do not have any value for the life of the parent, only that they have decided to value this more. So many debates break down on this. And do I think there's value in engaging with that? Ultimately, no, because if you found yourself in that situation, then what you've done is you've already stumbled into a debate where you're not actually arguing about the same thing. And it's probably best to disengage, because not in a, well, boy, it's unsafe to argue that, but just in a, there's nothing productive that's going to come out of this, because you're not even arguing about the same thing. You haven't actually taken opposing views on a specific issue. You have taken incompatible views on two related issues, and you're just going to keep passing each other. You're arguing past each other because you're not actually debating the same points. And it's best to just not waste your energy on that, in my personal opinion. And I say that in the broad strokes. Like, I have a lot of issues with the presentation of debate in our culture. I will say that, broadly speaking, if and when debate has value, it is in a one-on-one dynamic with someone that you have an actual direct personal connection with and that you feel you might have a chance at reaching. The broad sense of, tonight on debate, and we will settle the argument between, I see almost no value in that stuff at this point. If there ever was value to it, it has been stripped away. So imagine some semi-ideal world where the government, courts, and law enforcement actually support trans rights. What do you think would happen in scenarios where medical and mental health professionals say letting a kid go on blockers and socially transition is in their best interest, but the parents just flatly refuse because they're like conservative Mormons or something? Probably the same kind of thing that happens when parents refuse any kind of medical treatment for their children on religious grounds, because that does happen. There are various religious grounds on which people are against certain kinds of procedures, certain kinds of medicine, or just against the idea of getting their children treated at all. And by and large, unless the initial living situation is itself neglectful, generally it defaults to the parents. And I imagine that would be the same thing. Do I think that that's right? God, that is a minefield that I do not feel like navigating. But that realistically, that is what would happen. It would be folded into that same kind of conversation. And it probably would require religious grounding. Because I think if a parent just said, I don't want my kid to be treated, why not? Because I just think it's bad. That probably at least would get challenged in the interest of the children. Whereas if somebody said, for religious reasons, I don't believe it's right for my kid to transition, that would probably largely end up being respected, because there's a lot of defaulting to the rights of parents, especially on religious issues. And it would be a whole separate debate on whether or not that's okay. And that is not one that I have the spoons for today or possibly ever. So I'm reading a book that's told from the perspective of two warring Roman emperors. They both have advisors who continually argue with them, but they never have them executed or exiled or whatever. Roman emperors could literally do that on a whim because they recognize they need them. Is it bad writing to have the other characters in a story act as if they have access to the main character's internal monologue? Every time this happens in the story, I keep thinking, yeah, I know the emperor isn't going to have you killed for calling him a fool because I know what he's thinking, but you don't. I think it depends on the nature of the relationship and how well that relationship is established. Basically, when you have a character who's in a position of power, like a Roman emperor, basically somebody who unquestioningly could call for the death of literally anybody for any reason, it's not that you can't have other characters call him an asshole to his face, but you do need to establish that relationship in such a way that you understand why this would fly and why that other person is confident that this will be okay. So you can do it, there's just legwork involved. So I can't really make a blanket statement on whether it does or doesn't work, because it's one of those things that it can work if you earn it. The question is, do they earn it? Favorite song in Has Been Hotel? Probably Loser Baby. I do like Poison a lot, though. And yes, both of those are from the episode that I had. I spent 40 minutes talking about the problematic aspects. Go figure. Do you think Babylon 5's depiction of Sheridan suffers from a great man theory of history? I'm guessing you'll probably want the season 4 arc to resolve before giving a definitive answer, but I want to hear what you think at this stage. You're right. I do kind of want to see it resolve. The thing is, I think it's a harder thing to avoid when you're telling a continuous story over time, because from the view of the future history of the world of Babylon 5, would it be likely that Sheridan would be framed through this great man of history lens? Yes, more than likely, internally within that world. Does that make it bad storytelling to do it, or does that bother me in the same way that a lot of Doctor Who historicals focusing on the great men of history tend to bother me? The short answer is no, because these are the characters that we have gotten to know, and if you're going to tell a large-scale epic story, then yeah, it's kind of inevitable that most of the characters you're going to be focusing on are going to end up being important. I mean, that's part of why I avoided epic scale storytelling in my own book. I didn't want my characters to be important to history. And that actually, by necessity, meant that the scale of the storytelling was a bit small for how big the world I made was. But if you are telling the stories of the movers and shakers, that just kind of is what it is. That just sort of is the genre. In this case, it's the sci-fi version of epic fantasy. It's the stories of kings and generals and great knights. That's That's just the story you're telling. And when it's not actually meant to reflect our own actual real world history, I don't personally have the same degree of issue with it. Highlights of Gallifrey One. Nice to see you cosplay. One of my absolute faves. The cosplay in the TikTok was a lot of fun. Like, honestly, that might have been the highlight. Derek Jacobi, watching his interview panel and hearing him speak, that man is so charming. He is so unbelievably charming. That was great. Oh, I also got to be on a panel for the death match. Well, they called it the death match. They restructured it from how it usually is. Basically, they had like a bunch of us just go down a list and like make cases for why various episodes of Doctor Who were like vital and important and worth preserving. And that was just fun. It was the only panel I was on, but I had a good time doing it. And I think that does it. Okay, I am back in the chat, and ooh, I got stuff to catch up on here. Okay, let's see. Supreme Omega coming in with super chat. On Big 2 superhero comics, did the never-ending mess of retcons, resurrections, reboots, character assassination events drove you away? Because it did for me. Yeah, very specifically, it put me off the X-Men. Because in the early mid-90s, there was a point where like I missed a couple of months of X-Men, and I picked up an issue and just flipped through it. And I swear every single character who I knew was either dead, had switched sides, or had a clone. And I put it down and went, I can't. I feel like in many ways the 90s X-Men suffered from the problems that most of the entire continuity of both DC and Marvel suffer from these days, which is too many events, too many crossovers, too many status quo shakeups. Stuff never normalizes, and it's hard to get invested in. Yeah, it absolutely drove me away. My actual period of buying comic books off the shelves was basically, I don't know, 92 through 95-ish. I didn't actually buy them for very long. John Vinyls, thank you very much for the super chat. Don't know why we got Scottish. That's so cool that Pixar is branching out into new kinds of stories instead of just those of older middle-class white dads. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. I don't want any of the stuff that I said about Turning Red to take away from the fact that they did step well outside of their normal wheelhouse of storytelling. Like, good on them for that. It's just, it didn't connect to me in the same ways. It happens. I have this idea for a sci-fi story that starts tracking a made-up family in the 1980s. What type of computer would a lower middle-class nerd in 1988 most likely have? Secondhand Commodore 64, maybe? I don't know. Michelle Gomez is 55. Okay. I'm not going to look up all the other actresses who are also 55. It's the 60th anniversary mini-series. Every release is a crossover. 4th Doctor with Kate Stewart in parts 1, 5 with Jenny in part 2. I think the last part is 8 and Susan. Interesting. Okay. Am I planning on checking out more 9th Doctor audios? Yes, I do. I honestly feel like they peaked with Respond to All Calls, the second set. I liked Into the Stars, but I know others didn't. I do have some of the other ones. I would like to get to them. I haven't yet. What do you think of Kaguya-sama? Love is War. I do not know what it is, so I have no opinion. Supreme Omega back again. Have you heard of Sins Past? Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of Sins Past. It has the retcon where Norman had a romance with Gwen. It's considered the other bad Spidey story alongside One More Day and the Clone Saga, as it should be, because it is gross. It's really gross. It is massively out of character, and it exists for such stupid reasons. So, for people who don't know, the idea that was had was for these people to turn out, and for them to turn out to be Peter's adult children. Like, they would have like aged prematurely fast because of like radioactive blood and whatnot. And I believe it was going to be that they were the children of Gwen Stacy and Peter that Gwen had basically in secret. And that idea was not fully vetoed, but was required to be tweaked by the editor at the time. I can't remember if it was Joe Quesada or not. It might have been, it might not have been. But whoever the editor on the book was at the time decided that we can do this, but they can't be Peter's kids because that ages Peter too much for him to have adult children, which, first of all, you're having them artificially aged up. So no. Also, second of all, who can't, like, I've gone off before on their refusal to let Peter freaking age. It's part of why they hated him married, so many of them. And somehow it was decided that the better option was to have them be Norman's kids, but to still have Gwen be the mother, meaning she cheated on Peter with Norman randomly out of nowhere. It was so bad. Like, it's questionable how good the initial idea was. But the change due to editorial mandate resulted in something that was just, forgive me because I'm going to swear, it was just fucking gross. It was gross. Yeah, Spider-Man, like, the thing is, Sins Past and One More Day, I actually feel like, in many ways, are damning and character damaging in a permanent way to multiple characters. Clone Saga is just a mess. Clone Saga is just bad storytelling. But we can kind of point and laugh and go, boy, that wasn't very good, was it? And move on. But, like, what was done with Sins Past and One More Day, it's like, this is not just bad, this is wrong. There is a difference. There is a difference between a story being bad and a story being wrong. Like, those ones are wrong. So I wouldn't even put Clone Saga in the same category, because Clone Saga is just bad. It's just garden variety bad. John Vinyl is back again. Got a favorite Leica Studios film, by the way? Paranorman. I think that's my favorite one. I know a lot of people go for Coraline, but I really liked Paranorman a lot. What else we got? Saw that. Which episode did you defend Gallifrey One Deathmatch panel? I had to do 6. Like, these weren't assigned. We kind of went down the line and picked some, but you couldn't repeat one that anybody else said. So if somebody got to one you were going to do, you had to pick another one. See if I can remember the 6 that I did. I did The Doctor Falls. I did Tomb of the Cybermen. I did Power of the Doctor. Trying to remember what the other 3 were. I can't remember now. I can't remember what the other 3 were. I would say, let me check down where I wrote them down, except I had a list of, like, all possibles, and I was deleting things off the list. It was on my phone. I was deleting things off the list as they got said, including as I said them, so I knew not to use them. Yeah. I know I was going to do the Happiness Patrol, but somebody beat me to it. I'm trying to remember what the other ones were. Oh, City of Death. City of Death was one. I don't remember the other 2. Okay, let's see. Coyote Azul, back again. As someone who lives where Dragon Con is held, it's a slog spread out over 5 hotels, summer humidity, and the crowds I stopped attending a decade ago. Oh, shit. I did not realize it was spread out across that much space. Actually, maybe not Dragon Con then. Like, I was considering it because I think attendance numbers, it's not that much bigger than Rose City Comic Con, which I've been to. But if that's how they do it, if like it's spread over 5 hotels as opposed to in one convention center, no, don't love that. Lord. Dharma back again. 3-time challenge coin to Coyote Azul. Very nice of you. And Supreme Omega. How do you separate a good retcon from a bad retcon? Okay, so and this is a we're running over. Okay, I'm gonna try and wrap up after this super chat, Carowin, assuming no others come in. So my general rule of thumb when it comes to retcons, and now this is not an absolute, but this is a guideline. A good retcon expands. A bad retcon contracts. Here's what I mean by that. Technically, anything that is new information for events we already saw happen, or is a surprising addition to any piece of back history we did not already have, counts as a retcon. A good retcon should expand out to more possibilities. It should give you a different perspective on something. As a rule of thumb, I generally find that the worst retcons are usually focused on undoing something, on removing something. I'm not going to say that every retcon that does that is bad, because sometimes something has to be retconned because holy crap, that was really bad and we should strike that from the history. So like, I'm not going to say that that's never worth it, although you rarely get a good story out of a retcon doing that. Even if you're fixing something that needs to be fixed, when your goal is to fix a thing as opposed to introduce information that allows you to do something new, when your goal is to fix or undo something, you probably don't get a very good story. You might get a necessary story depending on how bad the thing you're fixing is, but you probably won't get a very compelling story in and of itself. It'll just be one that's like, oh, well, good, that's the story that fixed that. So yeah, general rule of thumb, a good retcon makes you go, oh, okay, well, that opens up some possibilities. And a bad retcon makes you go, oh, so you just, whole bunch of stuff just didn't happen. Or like, I now have to constantly be reminded, oh, actually it was this, even though we saw that. Like, something where that's your main takeaway, probably not a great retcon, or at the very least, not a good story that resulted from it. I suppose you could make a separate question on whether the retcon itself is good or bad, and whether or not the story the retcon is contained in is good or bad. Because whether or not a retcon is good or bad probably depends on what you feel about what's being retconned. Whether or not a good story results, I think, falls a bit more in line with sort of what I laid out. Whew! There we go. That being said, if you have the daring and stamina, I might be able to attempt for the first time in a long time. I mean, well, like, based on what you've told me, Coyote Azul, Dragon Con just dropped down my priority list a fair bit. I gotta say that. Let's see. Just finishing this off. Okay. Thank you everybody very much for joining me. It's good to be back. Tomorrow, I am going to be streaming on Twitch in the morning, 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. I know my schedule. Eastern Standard Time. I'm probably going to be doing one more day of playing Skull, the Hero Slayer. I had to kind of limit my options for what I was going to play because my mouse is being weird and like it's doing weird stuff with certain programs. So I have a new mouse coming in, but it's not going to be until Thursday. So I needed to pick something that I could play controller only. So that'll be Wednesday. Saturday's video is going to be about swearing in cartoons. And I know that feels like a very drawn out topic. Like, haven't we been talking about that one since the 90s? Yes, we have, but it keeps coming up. So I want to get my thoughts out there on it. And yeah, that's what's coming up in the immediate. So, and also I'll be streaming on Friday on Twitch as well. Friday, hopefully by then I'll have my new mouse in, and I intend to play some more Dark Side Detective. So thank you everybody for joining me. This has been fun. As always, I hope that you have a great rest of your day, great rest of the week. Be well, be safe, be kind, and please remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. McCavity!